Hey guys, this is Q, and I'm out here in beautiful Indiana with Alan with A&A Optics. Alan, can you tell everybody a little bit about your company?
Basically, I started my company about 9 months ago, and the sole purpose of my company was to take people that don't know a lot about scopes, don't know exactly what they want for what they're doing, and walk them into the absolutely perfectly scope, binoculars, spotting scope, rings, bases, whatever it happens to be, for their particular use, their price range, and basically just give them somebody that they can trust not to lie to them, just to sell them a more expensive product.
Exactly. And right now, guys, we know that a lot of people are putting hard-earned money into great guns, but what we want to do is to ensure that if this is the first gun you've built, the first gun you've purchased, we want to make sure that you're getting the right scope that's right for you. We know that you want to keep that gun in your collection for maybe a long period of time, something that you can pass along to your family members, so we want to make sure it's right for you. So for today, we will cover 3 major areas. 1 is price, 2 is product, and 3 is purpose. So at the end of this, hopefully you'll get something out of it. Stay tuned. Okay, Alan, I know there are several, probably hundreds of companies out there, thousands of different varieties of scopes and types of scopes. Can you run us through a few scopes that you know about and what you would probably recommend maybe have on some of your own guns? Tell us a little bit about them.
Sure can. Basically, you can go with scopes, you can go anything from mild all the way up to wild. You know, for instance, this scope right here, it's horrible at quick acquisition targets. If you're shooting 10 yards, this is a horrible scope to have. If you're shooting 1,000 yards, a red dot is not your best option. So basically, everybody talks about what's the best scope for me. Well, there's no blanket answer to that. It depends on what you're doing, what you're using it for, and what your intended purpose is. You've got things on these scopes, like, for instance, this had big, tall target turrets. This scope here doesn't. Basically, if I want to adjust for elevation and adjust for the further I shoot out, adjust the turrets, I want something like this. I want to be able to grab that with a gloved hand and not have a problem with it. If I'm holding over for a hunting scope, that's just fine because I'm going to sight that gun in and leave it alone. So really, it all depends on what you're wanting to do with the scope.
Okay, you said holdover. What does that mean?
Basically, holdovers most times referred to as Kentucky windage. When you dial a scope, dialing is more precise.
Right.
You dial a scope and you get an exact zero at whatever range you're shooting at that particular second. When you hold over, it's a lot faster, but you just say basically, okay, this is my 100-yard zero, right here ought to be 300. And I mean, obviously you have to test it before shooting at an animal or whatever it happens to be, but holdover, you aim higher. Dialing, you just dial it to where it exactly is. Dialing is great for a gun that's going to be 90% of the time on the range. If I'm actually shooting at 1,000 yards on a competition or whatever it happens to be, I'll dial every time because it's more precise. If I'm deer hunting, deer do not stand still as long as steel targets do. So basically, if I'm deer hunting, that'll do it and shoot. And if I miss a deer by an inch, the deer doesn't know the difference.
Wow, you mentioned a lot of different things, deer hunting, steel, so actually you have to get a scope that fits the purpose. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that. All right, guys, Alan alluded to the fact that we have to watch our purpose, focus on the purpose for the scope that we'll be using. So Alan, on this table right now, we have several different calibers, different styles of guns, from AR to precision rifles. How does a new shooter or a shooter in general find the right scope that fits their actual purpose?
Well, to be honest with you, there's a lot you got to read a lot, and you really just got to think about it. For instance, this scope right here goes from 5x all the way up to 20x. Now, 5x means that it's 5 times closer. It appears 5 times closer than it actually is. So, if you're doing a gun that's say for 20-yard shots, 5x, although it can be done on 5x, you don't need it. You don't need to be zoomed 5 times closer to the 20-yard shot. Now you take this scope. This is a 1:4, or this scope, which is unmagnified. It's a red dot. If my purpose is shooting 1,000 yards, I need a little bit of magnification. The closer I get to the target, the better. Now that also plays into the fact that with long-range shooting, you have to deal with a thing called mirage, which means you can't always use the highest zoom. But like, for instance, on a 5 to 20, you'll always be able to use 10 or
okay,
something.
Alan, if I could, you say 5 to 20, 1 to 4. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Basically, on this scope right here, this is a 1 to 4. And what it means is you can shoot it right here. It's on 1x, which means no zoom whatsoever, wide field of view. It's made for moving targets, fast acquisition, stuff like that. Now this scope, you want to shoot a little bit further, you dial it up to 4, and now you can reach out there a little bit further. You can zoom in, you can shoot better groups, and just basically it makes longer range shooting a lot easier.
Okay, just for layman, if you are at 1, your picture is this big, and if you're you're way back, but if you're at 4, it's a smaller picture, but you're up close.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right, so if I'm out and my purpose is to hunt, what scope would you recommend, or how would you actually get me toward finding the right scope?
The first thing we'd have to talk about is what range, how do you hunt? Are you the kind of guy that sits in brush and you aren't going to shoot past 20 yards? Or are you the kind of guy that sits on the edge of a field and might shoot 300 or 400? But no matter what, when you talk about hunting scopes, basically these two, you take them off the table. These have got target turrets on them. You don't, for hunting, especially in Indiana, you just don't need all that stuff hanging off the rifle, catching on limbs and all that. You look for something more sleek design like this, or maybe the Swarovski over here. But basically, zoom range is mainly dictated by what ranges you want to shoot. Type of scope, as far as target turrets and whatnot, is dictated by whether it's a range gun, whether it's a hunting gun. Like I said, there's a lot of different options out there, and you just need to make sure you get in the right class of scope for your application.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of questions will come up concerning price. If I'm going to find the right scope at the right price. So that's something that we need to talk about as well.